Hey, Pete Winarski here, founder and CEO of Win Enterprises LLC. And today I am excited to share a few things about your business strategy and its future and what you need to do in terms of making it thrive, survive in the immediate term because you may be in trouble, but then thrive for the longer term. So before we get into that, think about this week coming up. You have the weekend because it's Friday right now. You have the weekend, you have next week, and we are now into September. So we're sitting at 3.5 months to go before the end of the year. So for a lot of you, you're thinking, thank God 2020 will be behind us soon. And I'm sure we could probably have a worldwide celebration to that fact, for sure. In addition, though, business people tend to think in year increments or quarterly increments. It's kind of an artificial way to go, but yearly, we have New Year's every year. So of course there's the changing of the clock, right? The calendar flips another year, and we have 4 seasons. So quarters, the financial quarters that our business world tends to push us to think about. There's some rationality there too. The changing of the seasons. That's what's going on here. We're changing from summer to fall right now. All right, no big deal. So you basically have one more quarter to your business. What can you still achieve this year? For you goal achievement people, let's see if I still have it here. Yes, on my desk, grabbing it. This is, now at this stage, an oldie but goodie. Act Now, a daily action log for achieving your goals in 90 days. You have basically 90 days plus 2 weeks, right? So you got just over 100 days left to the year, right? So what will you accomplish in the last 100 days? And what kind of booster shot do you need? So the booster shot I want to offer you right now is this webinar for business leaders that we're doing next Thursday. And that is a webinar about rocketing your revenue success secrets. And we're really pulling a lot of the principles that the large companies, because of course we work with, sort of that 0 to a few million in a business advisory role, but then the idea of a few million to a few billion in a business consulting role. And the good news is all of those principles that the larger companies use to be successful and to grow their businesses and to thrive apply to the smaller companies too, right? So with that in mind, that's what we're doing. We're going to share some principles in this live training on Thursday. Let me tell you the link, and we'll type it in the notes afterwards, but it's go.winconsulting.co/rocket, as in rocket your revenue, right? And rocket your revenue success secrets. So please do register. We want to make sure you get a seat, get there. This will be the booster shot. You get to decide if it's the booster shot to the shoulder or to the butt, but whatever it is, it's going to jazz up your business, give you some new perspectives, and make that last 100 days between now and the end of the year something that will actually redeem your year, because 2020 for most of us has been the pits. All right, so let's talk about strategy wise. The reason I'm talking about this right now, excuse me, I was actually a speaker this morning in this very spot. I wore the same shirt. I was in the same, general location. I did it right here in my home office, and ended up talking about this topic, this conversation about strategy is getting ahead of what's coming. It's recognizing, well, where are you right now? How are you performing versus what you want to perform at? And then answering the question, what's my potential, and what changes might I make, right? So it's all of that wrapped up. So a lot of times, the big picture strategy comes into play either because internally, there's internal and external forces. So internally, we get some motivation, or we realize the light bulb goes on, bing, and you get that light bulb moment and you realize that there's more out there than what you've been doing, and you want to serve more people. You want to have greater impact. And so you make the adjustments that you need to make in your business in order to enable that. Then there's external forces, of course, like things like a pandemic, right? The world shuts down and goes to sleep for a few months. The situation we have now, of course, buyer behavior has changed and it will remain different than it was. Don't know what it will become exactly. That's for you to figure out with your specific market and your customers. But the idea of it going back to what it was, don't expect that. So the problem, of course, is if your business is the way it was, but your market and your customers have changed, then you're probably in trouble and you need to make some changes yourself. So let's look at the types of things that you want to do. What do you add? What do you change? What do you remove? What do you add? What service line could you add, or product could you add, or new capability, or people? What team? What relationships? What joint venture relationships could you add? All of these are within the range of possibility of what you could do to add and expand what your business does today. Changes. What changes? Now, change is all about looking at your current capabilities, your processes, your systems, what you do, how you do it, and what can you always be tweaking, always change, and from a continuous improvement standpoint. Of course, remember, my team and I, we all have really deep experience in operations improvement, Toyota Production System. Some of us came out of wire mold, some from a Danaher background, Toyota experience and exposure, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that list goes on, and it's in our DNA. No matter if we're talking about marketing now, or are we talking about revenue building, or are we talking about strategy, like what changes, that's still in our DNA. So it just is. And we are really, it's embedded into who we are. So we naturally think that way. So changes, what tweak changes can you make to adjust your processes, to adjust your results? And here's the great news. And we'll really dive into this principle next Thursday in this live training. It only takes a couple tweaks here and there, a couple small changes in a few key areas to end up creating really big results, right? Really big impact for you. So that's the good news. So think of what changes you need to make, because you can't sit still. Somebody's going to pass right by you, steal all your customers, and you're done, right? So can't sit still. Then remove. What do you remove? What things are you doing now that you recognize these got to stop, right? It could be a product that's not producing the revenue. It's not, the margin's no longer there. The sales have dropped. It's not viable any longer. Nobody wants it. The technology's old, or whatever the case may be. Is it a product or service that needs to change, and you get rid of it? You just realize, I'm going to focus my energy and my resources somewhere else. What about your processes? Is there something you want to remove there? Are there relationships that you have with suppliers or partners that just aren't working out? They're not fruitful for everybody the way they used to be. And that could be true in the employee base too. Is there a contractor or employee that you were working with that's just not, it doesn't do the good that it did, right? And so therefore that might be worth removing. So the other thing to remember is, if you add, you also need to potentially remove to create the space. So that's another challenge. A lot of us business leaders, we want to keep adding to the top. I'm going to throw more on the pile, throw more on the pile. And that's dangerous, right? Because you only have so much personal capacity. You only have so much mental bandwidth. And so don't do that to yourself, right? So your team only has so much capacity and sanity. And so if you want to thrive as a business, you might need to make some changes now, adding, subtracting, removing, changing, and get your whole team on board with how that looks. And as you add, figure out what their capacity is, and recognize if you also need to subtract, or do you add more resources? Now, if you don't have the revenue, of course, this is back to why we're talking about revenue, rocket your revenue, those principles of getting more business, some of this, you got to get the oxygen into your company, right? You've got to get cash flowing. So you need revenue. So all of this matters. All of this lays into your strategy. It turns into what initiatives do you do? What are your action plans? Who owns what? What are the metrics? So if you're a thousands of employees size company, then of course you've got this whole structure and it cascades down to layer to layer to layer, and you create some focus of who owns what from a group standpoint, and you drive initiatives like crazy. If you are a relatively small company, you still do that, but it may not cascade anywhere, right? You may just have 2 or 3 people carrying the weight. And of course, if you're a one-person company, the principles are still the same. It's just that it might just be you. And then, of course, that's the question is, should I go grab some other resources to help me? So there's a lot to it, right? There's a lot to the strategy exercise. So let's not get lost in the fact that this is a really big question with a lot of dimensions to it. And I challenge you just to think about, for right now, what might you add, what might you change, and what might you remove? And let's keep this conversation going. We'll see you at the webinar. Join, register, get there to this live virtual training Thursday, I believe 7 p.m. Eastern, whether you make it live or not. Register. I don't know if we'll do a replay, but certainly if you don't register, we wouldn't send you a replay because you didn't know to register in the first place. So get there. Go.winconsulting.co/rocket. See you then.